percents, fractions, and decimals. Now, percents, fractions, and decimals, they're all the same thing. They're just represented in different ways. And it's the focus of this lesson to figure out how we change fractions and decimals into percents and how we change percents into fractions and decimals. So a lot of words here, but it's actually pretty easy once we get down to it. So quickly here, what we got here is to write decimals as percents, just move the decimal 2 spaces to the right, because that is the same as multiplying by 100. To write percents as decimals, move the decimal 2 spaces to the left, because that's the same as dividing by 100, because we're making it per 100 for percents. To change fractions into percents, just divide the numerator by the denominator and then multiply by 100. To put percents, fractions, and decimals in order, change them into decimals, then put them in the correct order. To write a percent as a fraction, put the percent in fraction form with a numerator of 100 and then simplify. Like I said, a lot of words, but this is really quick once we get through it. So once you get through all those words there. So to write each decimal as a percent, all you have to do is you have to move the decimal place 2 spaces to the right. Because remember, we're changing it into this being divided by 100. So 0.52 divided by 100, this is the hundredths place. So it's just going to be 2 spaces over 1, 2. So 52%. Over here, 0.09, same thing. It's just going to be 9%. For here, bet you can figure it out. It's the same thing, 2 spaces over. And it's really important to realize this whole idea that when you're working with percents and changing them from one thing to the other, it's always going to be moving 2 spaces to the left or 2 spaces to the right, depending upon what you're doing. Never 3, never 1, just 2. So to write each percent as a decimal, then we move 2 spaces to the left. So there's no decimal here, so it's assumed it's going to be right here. And we just move it 2 spaces to the left, 1, 2. So now we got 0. I'd like to add the 0 there to indicate that that's a decimal. I just think that's easier to see, so it's just 0.45. Same thing here. We got a decimal here this time, so it's 2 spaces, so it's going to be 0.213. Here, again, we got our decimal here. The only thing that's a little bit tricky is I can't move it 2 spaces. So what I have to do is I have to add an extra 0, because here, this means 3%. This still means 3%. It just means that there's 0 tens. But now I can move the decimal 1 space and 2 space over, and so I've just got 0.03. And that's how you do it with changing percents into decimals. Now, from ordering from least to greatest, what you have to do is figure out the decimals and then just arrange them the right way. So here, 1/2, that's going to be 0.5. This is already a decimal, so now we got this. So it's going to be, well, remember the decimals over here, move it 2 spaces over 1, 2, so it's going to be 0.12. And then, let's just write this here to make it all nice and neat. I just put them in the right order. So it's from least to greatest, 0.12. Then I got 0.25. Then I got 0.5. That's from least to greatest. Now, one thing to keep in mind is it's best to write it up as it occurs originally, or as it shows originally. So this is going to be the final answer, 12%. Then 0.25, then 1/2. Because then you clearly have done what the problem asks, because that's the order that they should go in. Now, writing each fraction as a percent, for this sort of stuff, just use a calculator, because that makes it a lot simpler, and it's fine here. 7/9, that's going to be, if we put it into our calculator, it's going to be 0.7 with a vinculum over the top forever. It's going to go 0.7777 forever. if I were to ask you to go ahead and do this for a little while, it would look like that. And eventually on your calculator, strangely enough, when it runs out of spaces, the last one will be an 8 because it's rounding up. There's another 7 over here, but the thing is the 7 that's past the screen, it rounds the last one up to an 8. So that's a little bit confusing when you use a calculator. But it is a repeating decimal. Remember that if it works that way. So right now what I would need to do is I'm going to get rid of that part. I just thought was an interesting reminder on that. So get back here. And I'm going to write this out a little bit because I need to get some decimal spaces here. I'm still going to say it's like that. The vacuum. So now I've got enough space I can move it over 2 spaces. So here, 1, 2. So it's going to be 77.7 division over percent. Now, and if you were asked to round to the tenths, like I said before, you would just go ahead and see here, well, this would be set the 7 for that. But if I wanted to round to the tenths, I'd have to up this to 77.8%. This is more accurate, but if you were asked to round, as occasionally you are, that's the way you do it. 45 divided by 50, this is going to be 90 or 0.9. Actually, just come up as 0.9 on your calculator. So let's remember here, 0.9 is what it would look like. But we can't move it 2 spaces over, so that's the reason why we add that 0. So let me move it over 2 spaces, so it's 90%. Now down here, each percent, write each percent as a fraction in its simplest form. First thing we're going to do is, for each of these problems, just write it out as a fraction. Remember, all a percent is a number that is over 100. And then all I do is I simplify. Well, does anything go into 6 and 100? Well, yeah, 2 does. So it's going to be 3 and 50. Remember, this divided by 2, this divided by 2. Does anything go into 45 and 100? Think about it for a second. And remember, 5, because it's 5 and 0. So it's going to be 9 over 20. The last one over here, divisibility test, since it ends in 0, it's divisible by 10. So it's just going to be 3 over 10. And we're all done.